Okay. So the question that has been sitting in the back of my mind is how do you find meaning at your work? And I think the question has been coming up for me because I've now gone through a little more than 2 years of being a professional developer. And I've worked in projects and jobs that have been filled with meaning and that I've enjoyed. And even though they were hard, the fact that I was aligned with the mission of the project or the company or the job made it um, worth it, right? So when I think of you and of other people that I've worked with that have established themselves as leaders, it seems like you have shortcutted the way to meaning, figuring out what is your purpose in a given situation. So that's what I want to explore. Um, I'll give you a proper intro, even though we know each other so well. It's strange, but you're the Senior Vice President of Technology at Spins, which describes himself as the leading wellness-focused data technology company. And I met you when we worked together at Uptake. You were a senior staff software engineer. I was lucky enough to be on your team with a couple other really great devs. And before that, you've had a long career as a software engineer. So I thought maybe a good place to start, because it's so interesting and unique to other people that I've met in tech, is that you grew up in Serbia. So I wanted to start there. If maybe you could tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up there.
It was a great childhood. Well, the beginning of it anyway. So back then it was Yugoslavia. It was a very nice country in my memory, at least. And there was in part, there was a very high focus on education. Everything was state-run, most companies, certainly education, healthcare. And there was a sense of both competition and kind of a sense of pride in doing well in education. So school was naturally a big part of life, and I did well in elementary school, at least. And in elementary school, I had an interest in the arts, and that interest never left me. And then that interest changed in different shapes over time. And now I'm in engineering and software, but I still have that same mindset from when I was a kid in Yugoslavia. And my interest in the arts was a lot around representing nature and representing how things are. And they got me very interested into how things work, why they work like that. Is there any other way they can work? And that interest just exploded in various directions. So amongst other things, I got a computer when I was a kid, a Commodore 128D, and D was very fancy because it was a diskette and not a cassette computer. And there, my interest in computers develops. And computers for me were a hobby for the longest time, pretty much all up to college. I didn't do so well in high school. It was a turbulent time back in Yugoslavia in the 90s. But nonetheless, I somehow managed to get into architecture school of the Belgrade University. And there I started professionally coding. Before that, my interest in computers had to do again with arts, with things like Photoshop and Illustrator and 3D modeling programs and things around that. And then how do you automate some of those things? How do you template? How do you find patterns in work to improve the workflow and output? And then that changed to direct interest in programming right around end of high school, beginning of college, where I realized that I could do a lot in college through computers. There were lots of maps, there was lots of creating them, lots of architectural designs that were easier to put together and update, especially through the use of computers. And I picked up all of that kind of on the go. I'm eternally grateful to all the forums from that time where I picked up all kinds of knowledge. Internet changed my life. That was, I think, the biggest impact in me growing up. right around 1995, 96, something like that, internet becomes a thing, and I get access to knowledge so far greater than I could imagine. And that's how I picked up what I'm doing right now. And then very quickly, at the beginning of college, after I figured out how to help myself, other people asked me to help them. The requests got bigger and bigger, and my knowledge with it just grew. And that turned into a job in the United States at one point, lots of freelancing and consulting also, and exposed me to a variety of situations, variety of asks, demands, companies, sizes, themes, methodologies, and that's kind of the intro into what I'm doing right now. Kind of an accident side effect, total side effect, because I never graduated architecture. I went into architecture because it was a nice combination between the practicalities of engineering and an artistic expression. And that's something as an idea that I still hold very dear. That there is something to me that's very important about expressing oneself humanity, even in engineering jobs. That an engineering job is not just making a bridge stand and carry trucks over. That an important thing about a bridge is what it stands for. What is the meaning of it? And that for me, those things are inseparable.
Yeah, it's so when you were young, it sounds like you, which probably a lot of engineers have, is you started just being interested in nature and interested in how things work. I think that that's the curiosity part is something that you find in any good engineer, at least. I think we just all have the natural curiosity. Like you poke around, how does that work? What if I touch that? What if I move that around?
Yep.
Although I think what's unique to you is you started almost naturally moving into programming based on the needs of your company, or maybe you had existing problems that you were able to solve with programming.
I had existing problems that I was able to solve with programming, and really college emphasized that a lot. And I saw the difference between trying to pull all of the work by hand and trying to pull off that work with the help of programs. The difference is comically big. It's stunning. And that kind of gave me a personal experience to recognize the value of this knowledge. I had a very concrete problem on my hands, and I was able to do it like at least 10 times faster than I would have otherwise. And that really, really made an impact on me.
Mm-hmm. When you dropped out of the architecture program, did you face backlash from friends or family or the dean of school? Okay.
Absolutely, of course. But friends and family didn't have a better suggestion. So especially growing up in Yugoslavia, and I'm sure that there's a very similar sentiment in the United States. Like you have a regular path: do well in elementary school, to do well in high school, and then you get into a good college, which should give you a good job, and one good job leads to another, etc. So that's the story that I heard, just like many other people. And I very early realized that that story is bogus. That a lot of people who did well in school do not do well in jobs afterwards. That a lot of people who do well in school don't even do their job well. And I've seen the flip side of that, that a lot of people who don't have high schools, higher education schools, actually can do quite well. But there was always this sense that in order to be a valuable member of society, you absolutely must have a college degree, and God forbid, a master's or a doctorate. And that like simply every other path outside of that is not good somehow. So when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, the society that I was in turned upside down. There was economic strife, there was war, there was all kinds of situations that tested these statements very, very strongly. And these statements, in my experience, in that context, did not hold. And that gave me, in college, absolute confidence to make the decision to drop out of college and to move into full-time work into programming. And I had absolutely no hesitation about it whatsoever. I was sad that I'm not going to work in architecture, because it's a wonderful profession that I would summarize personally as building and enhancing our environment. I mean, it's such a meaningful task. And I'm very sad that that didn't happen. But on the other hand, I'm not sad at all that I adjusted to the situation. And there was a lot of backlash from friends and family about, oh, you're doing the wrong thing. But nobody can explain to me how am I going to pull off the next year or two in current context. Like so how do I pull off this college thing? Like, how am I going to move forward with this? Where does a job come in? When can I live independently and all that? Yeah, it'll happen. So I didn't buy it, and I decided to try something else.
Yeah, well, that's funny because up until somewhere around high school, when I got into coding, if anyone asked me what I was going to do when I grew up, I said I was going to be an architect. And the person that inspired me was Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was actually lucky enough to visit some of his buildings in Chicago. I did a class where we went around to the Roby House. We went out to the west suburbs where he built a lot of his homes. And I completely agree. It's an engineering. It's like you mentioned, like you said earlier. It's a mixture between the engineering, but also the meaning and the artistic expression. You're taking a piece of land and you're deciding what purpose it's gonna have.
It's a big deal.
And I like what Frank Lloyd Wright did because he was completely revolutionary at his time, where he decided to, instead of build against nature, build with nature. And you see his designs still to this day being used, and it's still considered revolutionary. You know, you're not just putting a box on the ground, you're taking nature and you're implementing it. You're mixing it with our own creation.
You're harmonizing. In stark contrast to a lot of architecture that's being put up today. And I completely understand making a contrarian statement, but making a contrarian statement as a rule seems like a poor idea to me.
Yeah.
In order for a contrarian statement to be effective, it needs to be rare and not a rule, because that to me kind of defeats the purpose. Just a personal opinion.
The other thing I identify with is is dropping out of college, right? I dropped out my second year as well. I think I'm lucky in that even though there's parts of our society that is very rigid, likely where in the time where you grew up, where people were just, you have to follow this same line. I think that there was also a huge counter movement in the opposite direction of fuck college, you don't need to do that, you can, do your own thing. And especially with the internet, you see, my biggest inspiration for leaving was YouTube. I would see YouTubers that were basically just telling me to drop out. I would see programmers that were using YouTube channels to make an income. So for me, I just saw enough evidence where it wasn't really, I wasn't even being that much rebellious. I was just following another pack of people that were doing that. The one thing that I probably could have benefited from staying in college would have been learning to work with other people well, and also just some organizational techniques. I think if I had just learned to not succumb to the system, but to work with the system a little better, I think I would have caused less troubles for myself in the first year or two. But you just have to learn that, yeah, there's a certain way that the rules are set up in an organization, and you need to follow the rules enough, to be a part of the group rather than always going against the group.
That is, first of all, it's never too late to learn such things. There are people well into their 40s and 50s who still have not learned such things. And it's not late for them either to learn such things. But I want to make a point here that I think is very important. we talked about growing up in a certain system, and a lot of people make an honest mistake of thinking that that is the system, without realizing that there are so many different systems. And that's something that happens in our industry. You have people who spend the majority of their career in startups, and then they think this is how companies work, and they join a larger company, and then they're completely baffled. How is it possible that people are doing this way, and vice versa? Somebody goes from a really big company into a startup, they're an accomplished professional, and then they get completely lost. The thing that I would highlight here is super important is the curiosity part. Learn the current system, whatever it is. That there is no one system, there is no 10 systems, every situation is different. And the curiosity and openness to learn, why is it set up like that? How did it become like that? Is what makes all of the difference, because world changes, companies change, trends change. So being able to learn, well, what changed? Why did it change? Why does it work the way it does? And then being able, I'll use the word harmonize again, to take your experience and to harmonize it with the current circumstance is something that I find very, very important. And then there's a part that's very hard, which is to accept that your current circumstance might not be fully harmonized with your prior experience. So now you need something new, something different, something that didn't happen before, and that's usually unpleasant. But in my experience, you end up richer for it.
Yeah, that is a trait that I think you could see that trait in a lot of good leaders, which is the idea of bringing your skills, bringing your personality, all the things that make you unique to the table, but harmonizing it and finding a way to also harmonize the people that work under you or that you influence so that they can do the same.
Ryan?
We were talking about the idea of harmony, and I was saying that I think that good leaders bring their unique selves, they bring their personality, their skills to the table, but they find a way to harmonize it and also to get the people they influence or the people that work under them to work in harmony. When you think of when you first started out, like your first couple of programming jobs, do you think you had those skills early on?
Absolutely not. Nothing
Okay.
further from it. Oh my goodness gracious. After I got over the initial imposter syndrome, then I thought for a while, and this was still early in my career, I thought that I was very smart, just very good at this. And just like, I know how to do this, I'm just going to make it happen. Only to realize that nothing could be further from the truth. So I was butting heads by calling out things that to me seemed unreasonable, out of place. But the thing that I didn't do at that time is ask, why is it this way? Because even though something is wrong, under quotes, wrong, there's very often a good reason for why things are like that. So instead of, like I used to, like, oh, this is wrong, let's just cut it and we're just going to do a new, better thing. Ask. I've learned to ask first. Well, why is it so? I've learned a lot from that. I've learned that sometimes a thing that appears wrong is actually not wrong at all. But again, without asking, that doesn't happen. And then I've learned through that another important thing, which is that just because something is wrong doesn't mean that you should just focus on eradicating it right away, because that wrong thing might have to do with how people feel about something. And I've learned that how people feel about something is as important and as all the other work, because that feeling is what creates collaboration and trust and moves things forward. So I've seen many times really, really good engineers push for the, quote, right solution, end quote, and alienate people around them as a result. And then they end up in a situation where they're not really in a company because they're a team of one. And because of that, the end result is that the project doesn't work out. So I've learned that asking about genuinely, without like loaded questions, without it, with as little as bias as possible, asking, why is this thing the way it is right now, is super valuable. So that was something that was very different about me at the beginning of my career, I did not know that, and I did not focus on harmonizing at all.
Were you able to convince yourself kind of blindly that you were doing a good job, or did you feel like a success, or did you feel like a failure, I guess, in those first couple years?
It was a sine wave. But at the very beginning, the sense of failure was strong because first of all, I didn't know what I don't know. And then I didn't know that when I get something to work, that it's actually good or not. So there was just a lot of doubt because of lack of knowledge. So I upped my knowledge. And when I upped my knowledge, my confidence grew as a result. So then I thought I was a success. But I, again, did not know how much I did not know, which was a lot. Looking back at it, like so much. So at that point, I felt like a tremendous success. And it took a few more of those waves to realize something that it took me almost mid through my career to realize that success and failure is not really a thing that's personal. I remember at one point when I joined a really good team, after having gone through ups and downs a few times, realizing this thought, it's still in my mind. I thought to myself, like, when I do something well, it's not a personal success because I was propped up by my colleagues and the company that propped all of us up. So it's not just, oh, I did this great thing. Yeah, I did this great thing in the context of all the people around me that helped make that happen. Starting with, the sales and the marketing as an example. They enabled me to have an opportunity to do this, and not to mention colleagues in engineering. And then conversely, when I fail at something, I also started thinking then, like, is it a personal failure or did we as a group fail? And that question was even more so interesting to me because for a very long time, I took everything as a personal failure. But then after a while, I realized when I was on longer projects, when I followed them for a longer time, I realized that there are conditions for a project to succeed and not succeed that has not a lot to do with individuals on the project. And here's how it first came to me. I worked at a wonderful company called Pathfinder Development. I still remember it fondly. Excellent team of engineers when I joined them. And I had this comparison, and this comparison is what produced the insight. Same engineers. I admired those engineers very, very much. Some projects were failures, not to embellish that further. And some projects were successes. And I thought to myself, well, how can that be when it's the same team of engineers on both, right? What's the difference? And that led me to think about, well, is there a difference outside of engineers, outside of product folks, outside of like management? And then I realized that, yeah, there are a lot more variables there that heavily influence the success of a project that literally have nothing to do with the quality of engineering being done on the project. And one example of that is contract negotiation. Terms of what is done, how it is evaluated, what complete means, and how well it's defined on a contract level, not even on a product level. And then I realized, yeah, there's more to this story. So failing is not a personal, completely personal thing either. And that allowed me to stop focusing on personal successes and failures and to consider the wider group, the wider team, the wider environment when thinking about that. And it was kind of it's a tricky thing to deal with because then you realize the boundaries of what are you in control of. Now, the downside is you're not in control of a lot of things. The upside is you still can influence things from any vantage point a lot. So something that I still struggle with better, but I still struggle with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. You could put great engineers on a sinking ship, and the ship's probably going to sink.
That's it. So being aware of more constraints, of more environmental variables, I think is very important to have sanity because it's very, very hard to deal with like a failed project where you gave your best, you wrote great code, everything turned out great from your perspective, and it was still a failure. Like, how do you explain that to yourself? That's something that I struggled with earlier in my career a lot. And being more in touch with reality by understanding those constraints, I just feel better now. It's not like that a failed project feels better. It's just like I understand better what's going on. I can live with myself better, and that helps me bring more of my energy tomorrow to work also.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at is there's an external force, which is the project, there's the code, there's even the team members.
Yep.
All of those things are external to you, and they impact your feelings. But it sounds like over the time you've been able to kind of distance yourself, detach yourself from the external situation, and you have your own personal little bubble of your own beliefs. I'm trying to describe, do you see what I'm getting at? Could you describe that in better detail than I am?
Here's how I would attempt to describe it. I believe that I've gotten better over time in delineating what am I in control of and what am I not in control of. So because of that, I can dedicate all my energy to the things that I'm in control of. And even if my environment is not great, I'm still in control of myself. And I can still do with myself whatever the heck I want. And then understanding that I'm not in control of a lot of aspects of my environment, I stopped wasting my energy on things that I cannot change. That had an interesting side effect. Realizing not wasting my energy on things that I cannot change allow me to have more energy to actually see the nuances about what can I change in my environment, to have a conversation about what's the priority, to give a pep talk to a team member who feels bad because something bad happened at work. Like, these are really, really small things. These are nuances, but they are influencing the environment for the better. And it took me having the energy to look into that, to recognize that. So that delineation is what makes work a lot easier for me. And I look at it, as an engineer today from the perspective of how much energy / time do you have for a given thing. And I feel that I'm better at dedicating my energy to things that actually make an impact. And then the bubble that you mentioned is the things that I can control. So things that I can control are the standards that I have, the values that I carry and that I propagate, quality of work that I demand. That also comes with some side effects of being fit or not fit for certain organizations and teams. So that's a very, very important side effect, because my values and standards do not fit in every environment. And I'd say that's okay. That's totally okay. Because then the energy is properly directed then to finding a fitting environment. And I also entirely dismiss the idea of better and worse. There is fitting and not fitting in my eyes today, and not better or worse. One company is not better than another company. It's how are you fitting into one versus the other. So in my bubble, I can do a lot of fun things. I can maintain a good attitude. I can be interested in making a good impact on my environment, on my colleagues, on the project that we're doing. And I can be kind of aloof about that, because that is kind of up to me. And because of that, it's very hard to mess with. Like, you can yell at me, you can fire me, you can do all kinds of things, but this is still up to me. And that really gave me a certain sense of levity that, again, gave me more energy to dedicate to helping people around me.
Yes, I remember very clearly at our Uptake stand-ups when everyone's going around the circle going, oh, yeah, yesterday I did that, yesterday I did this. And then you pop up and you're like, you had like 10 cups of coffee, like ready to go. Your manner of speaking was the same regardless of if you're giving a stand-up report or if you're giving code feedback, or if you're if you're having a technical meeting with multiple devs. That was something I noticed working with you, is your way of speaking. You never the negativity would show through just small cracks, and I think you would let it show when it kind of needed to. But I can see that. I remember that quite well. So now I want to talk about the things that you can't change, and namely the people that you work with. At Uptake, you were, I think, technically in the role of an individual contributor by title, but I think by the way you acted, you certainly, I think, had more responsibility than that. I think that you didn't necessarily tell people what to do, but you had quite a bit of influence around technical decisions. I remember you working with front-end developers and other parts of the company, so you had an influence beyond just contributing code in our team. How it seems like it's something that's important to you. When did you switch from just being the smart guy that just knows everything and wants to tell people how to do it to starting to take on other people's roles, kind of taking responsibility for how other people are doing as well?
That switch happened when I stopped caring more about being the smart guy who can do this for you, who can make it happen, and started caring more about helping people. And that was like 1/4, 1/3 through my career. And I think that that's a very natural progression. Here's why I think so. You want to prove yourself when you start. I think most people do. It's an assumption of mine. And you want to show that you know, you want to show that you belong, you want to show that you're capable and competent, right? So you're pushing for showing that you're smart, that you can do this and that. That, I've realized, has limitations, because a single engineer can only do so much. I mean, we don't have teams of engineers as an accident. Teams of engineers come out of necessity. Otherwise, you would just hire one person to do the whole thing for you. Why doesn't everybody do that? Because it's nearly impossible. The complexity of today's computer systems, software systems, is through the roof. It's very hard for one person to be able to manage all of that. So when I realized that, I started caring. Basically, you want to be on the winning team, right? If you're the winner on a losing team, if you're the smartest guy on the losing team, that still doesn't feel great. So I wanted to be on teams that do things well. And I realized that if I focused on basically what people need help with, that is a very banal and because of that efficient way to drive attention. So basically focus on what people need help with. And you find all kinds of problems, all kinds of solutions, and a lot of them are an excellent theme to dedicate your attention to. For instance, we were working on a front-end team. Front-end team is downstream from a back-end team very often. So we were full stack, but we had the services team that we were dependent on. And it's very easy to complain about, oh, this services team, they're totally bombing, they're not doing this right. We are awesome, we're great. It's just the services team is doing so poorly that we can't do anything with that. That's a very typical approach to that, because you put the boundary around your team and say, we're great, but the sum of it is that our thing, the thing that we're producing, is still not helping anybody. So that, again, is why I use that question as a rule of thumb. Are we helping anybody? Who are we helping? How much, right? So then the interest naturally goes to, well, the services team is struggling for some reason. Why? Go over and ask, like, what are you struggling with? Like, let them know what our problems are and ask them, like, what are your problems? And then some of them sometimes get into a discussion about it, and you learn about their problems. And then I most often realize, oh, they also have some upstream team that they're dependent on, or 5, right? And very often the problem that they're dealing with is very hard. Sometimes it's like an unreasonable, like somebody built a system in an unreasonable time because there was a pressure from management to deliver it, and now they don't know how to manage it, and there's no time to go back to refactor it with proper unit tests, and now we're just in a mess. So just understanding that helps a lot. And for those conversations, I got exposed to a lot of themes where I realized, hey, I actually know how to help you with this. Like, totally. Like, here's how I can help you. You can take it or leave it, but like, I totally want to help you. And a lot of times, a lot of people took me up on that. And that's how the interest widened across the team, across the organization, like across the story of a company or a crew, by simply asking, what can I help you with?
That's a great mindset. And it also sounds like you're using the same engineering curiosity, but instead with people, right?
Absolutely. Because there's always something more. Let me go into engineering for a second to explain this. So many times you have seen some code and you thought to yourself, only a crazy person could have done this. This is not possible for anybody sane to write. But then when you go deeper into that, you realize maybe it was a junior engineer. Maybe it was somebody who didn't have the proper training for the job. Like somebody put them on the task that wasn't appropriate fit. Maybe there was pressure from management to roll out something tomorrow. Otherwise, the whole company is going to go bust, right? There's always a good reason why something is bad. And getting to know it arms you with the knowledge of how not to create an environment next time for that to happen. Don't put a junior engineer on a very hard task. Don't put crazy pressures on engineering teams to deliver something in 24 hours, right? Solve it by not creating that environment. So it's very, very useful to learn why did it end up like that. So example of curiosity in engineering.
Yeah, I appreciate the openness and understanding to it. I've been that junior developer that was put on the task that I couldn't quite handle, and I've gotten varying responses. Sometimes it's from people that are compassionate and are trying to help, and sometimes it's people that would rather chastise you for what you did wrong. Which, when you haven't quite developed to that understanding of what you can change and what you can't change, then it can really put you into one of those sine waves on the bottom end of a sine wave, because then you just spend all this time thinking like, what did I do wrong? What did I,
Because you don't know what you don't know. And then you're taking it personally because you heard somebody personally chastise you. So of course it sounds personal. But if you widen the perspective a little bit and hear the story of a junior engineer on a task that's for a senior engineer, that really sounds silly. So whoever was dealing with task management did not do that well. So, and that's the story of fit. Mm-hmm. Because if something fits, you don't have problems like that. And understanding that fit better makes all the difference in my experience.
Yeah. And if that person is yourself, I think the lesson that two lessons that I've had to get drilled into my head quite a bit with this job is the number one is know what you can do, know what you're capable of, have some understanding of, can you get this project done the right way in a certain amount of time, and also splitting your ego from the code, splitting your ego from the design, taking your personal feelings out, learning how to detach from the external thing that you're building, because people are ready and willing to to dismantle what you've built at a moment's notice, and they're likely not doing it from a negative place. They're doing it from just their engineering curiosity. I want to go back down to earth a little bit. So you're vice president at this big startup in Chicago that does food data. Can you tell me a little bit about how that connects with your personal meaning, or just what does the company do and why is it important?
Not a startup, by the way, but yes.
Right.
Been around 20 years, been around a while, and it connects with me on a lot of levels, and I'm so grateful to have come across them, or for them to come across me. So this company focuses on natural products. Usually they have to do with things you would find in grocery, foodstuffs, but also they deal with supplements, they deal with beauty products, and so something outside of food also. But their focus is on natural products. And I'm a big foodie. Food is a part of my culture and a part of my identity. And like, it's such a big story, there's no time for that. It's just food and everything around food, the ritual, the nutrition is super important for me. So here we have a company that has the same interest. And they do something really cool with it. They get sales data of natural products, and then they analyze products themselves. They analyze their ingredients, the combination of them. They analyze the claims on the packages of those products. And then they make that informed opinion. It's a very, very informed opinion. And then they analyze, well, given these qualities and attributes of a product, how are sales going? What's popular right now? Why is it popular? Should it be popular? What's the next thing that's going to be popular? What should you sell in this category of products instead of the products that you're selling right now to satisfy, for instance, folks with a dietary restriction, as an example? And these are some of the best, this is some of the best advice, both for retailers and manufacturers, but also for people to have available and to analyze, because this is like the quality of your nutrition. It's the biggest freaking deal in the world. For me, the two non-negotiables are sleep and nutrition. Without that, like you don't even have a fighting chance. You have to have those two things covered. So this company deals very ethically, if I may add, which is very important because I've seen a bunch of companies that make claims about helping the world and really not coming through on those claims, which makes it really misleading, and it makes it not something that I can fit into, in my experience. So I'm happy that this company is doing a really good job, in my opinion, on a theme that I love so much. And it's so interesting to be able, to discuss entity relationship diagrams on things like, does it contain wheat or not? It's a endless source of puns and jokes, and it's very educational also, because as I'm sifting through data, as I'm working with modeling these data sets with people who know a lot about nutrition, I have also learned a lot in process. And this company, because of that, it's a data company. It deals with a large data, big data, so-called, which is a very nice engineering challenge on a personal level. They produce more information. They produce quality information on top of what they get. So in my eyes, they're enriching the world for better insights. And it's also interesting crew of people, because the theme of the company has attracted people who are into that topic, into natural products. So it's a nice crew of people to work with. So I'm very, very, very much aligned with the mission of this company and like with the task at hand as an engineer.
Yes, that's great. Well, I don't know if you can say exactly who your clients are, but what types of companies do you work with, or do you go straight to consumers?
No, we're B2B, And we have two general types of customers. We have retailers and manufacturers, and then we also have distributors and some other types of customers, but I won't focus on them. I'll focus on retailers and manufacturers. So our customers are folks who are producing natural products. They want to know how's their product rated in the market, specifically natural products markets. And then we have retailers, and retailers who sell natural products, and they want to know, well, which, in this category, which product should I carry and which product shouldn't I carry? Which ingredients are better to have in a product versus not? Because they want to have great sales of the stuff they keep on the shelves, and they want to make sure that their customers are getting I'll call it just a specific variety for that store that they want. Different retailers have a different needs in terms of, should they deal with only like the greatest, newest products that like you can't find it anywhere else, only at our store, or like, hey, this has been tried in every other store, it's a sure thing, guaranteed, it's a good product, and we want to keep it on our shelf, and like everything in between. So retailers have different needs in their variety and differentiation, and what categories are they carrying versus what categories are they not carrying for their particular set of customers. So those are the two general types of customers that we deal with.
It sounds like you have an issue or a problem that is probably similar to Uptake's, which is that you have so many different categories and domains of describing data. How do you deal with that problem?
I would say not as hard as Uptake's. Uptake's was really hard. But here, we do have the same category of a problem. I'm trying to condense these thoughts because there's a lot here. But at the bottom of this, you have your subject matter experts. You have people who know why are these categories the way they are, what products fit into what categories based on what rules, what criteria. I mean, natural products have been around for a very long time, for at least 2 decades, and then packaged goods have been around since the beginning of time. Knowing how to operate there requires quite a bit of experience. That's what I've noticed. Maybe not true, but that's my impression. Being able to translate that into a software system is really tricky, because you really have to understand the domain, and then you need to understand how to model that domain. And one word that keeps coming up in all of the systems that we're designing and all of the shortcomings that we have is metadata. Data that describes other data. We have really complex metadata. Managing that is really hard, because at some point you have to have an expert, a live human, interact with it and say, this is what's correct. This is my professional opinion of what's correct. Even when we're coming up with food attributes based on ingredients, somebody needs to create the rules for those attributes of how those ingredients interact with each other in order to suffice a certain attribute. So there's a lot here that is outside of engineering systems, right? For instance, we're not just processing stock market tick data, right? There, you can solve a lot of questions programmatically, and here you cannot. You can only solve so much. So the emphasis is on enabling, especially our data analysts, to give the right recommendations in the easiest way and to make sure that they have all the contextual information for their recommendation. So it's a pretty tough task.
Yeah, I've been working in an environment that is basically CRUD operations for the past year, which is a huge change from Uptake, where you don't have to deal with the idea of metadata. And it makes life a lot simpler, especially as a front-end developer. I think the problem, it touches every team, because if you're designing for data that you don't know the shape of that data, you have to think about the rules. You can't just lay it out and say this is what it is. You have to think about what are the different states that this data can take, and it creates just the code for that. I think what happens with the code is you end up having abstraction over abstraction, which becomes a technical problem.
Very much so. And here again, the problem gets a little bit wider, right? As an engineer, when you understand that there's a problem that requires an abstraction upon abstraction, pretty much like Uptake, where abstractions were through the roof, at one point you have to inform everybody else in the company about the effort and the cost of creating that properly and then maintaining it, to say, do we really, can we afford all these abstractions? Because these abstractions cost money. They cost money because you need many engineers to think about them, implement, maintain, and refactor them. And engineers make a pretty penny. So it's very hard to do that. It's also, in my opinion, not possible to do that with a really small team, because if you take all the code away, just keeping the abstractions in your mind is a huge effort. So you have to break it off. You have to say, this part of the abstraction, Ryan is going to be responsible for, because that's how much a single person can hold in their mind. And then how big is your abstraction? This is how many people you need to be responsible for parts of the abstraction. And then you need several people that are going to coordinate all the people who are managing those abstractions. So, I mean, now you have an abstraction right there, right? It gets really complicated. So some of these are not tenable. Like, for the amount of revenue that you can generate, you cannot hire that team to create that abstraction, to run it and maintain it, and for it not to fall on its face. So it's very important to ask the company, can you afford this? Because this is not just like more code, like running this code is an effort. So yeah, not every problem is solvable with the same resources, is what I would say.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of your time.
Thank you.
I don't, we could talk for hours about your company, and I think that we spent the last 10-15 minutes talking about actual technical things. I think in the beginning we had our eyes in the sky talking about a lot of what's going on in the brain, what's going on in your personal little bubble as you're growing and developing as a developer. Just thank you so much for doing this, being my test subject for whatever the hell it is I'm doing. I have a idea that these conversations probably don't happen enough, and people could be helped earlier in their career as they face issues as developers. And it's also just really inspiring, and I feel like I see your energy, and I see how you've positioned your life and your work so that you're doing things that are meaningful to you, and it rubs off on me. So I appreciate you taking the time, and I don't know what this is going to turn into, but I will let you know what it does. If you have other people in mind that you think that I could have a conversation with, I would appreciate an introduction. Just thank you so much.
Right. I think it's a great idea, and it's a great insight that a few words like this can help somebody early in their career. Because I know I've wasted years without guidance. I was just shooting in the dark. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Nice to see you again. And take care.
All right, man. See you later.
Bye.